Hello, my friend. My name is Byron, and I'm from the BJJ Brick Podcast. I want to thank you for checking out the podcast on the YouTube channel here. It's a weekly show dedicated to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and having fun on the mats. Enjoy the show.
Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends. This is episode 242 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I'm Gary. I got my partners in crime, Joe Thomas, Byron Jabara. How are you two guys doing today?
Man, we're doing great. We're happy to be here recording an episode. Excited to bring you the interview with Laurence Griffiths. He runs the website bjjstrength.com, Black Belt under Roger Gracie. Man, we can't get much of a better qualified person as far as helping you off the mat, getting you strong and ready to stay on the mat longer and perform better while you're there. So really excited for this interview to bring you guys today.
Great. Hey, guys, I'm doing good down here in Texas, but I'm more interested to know how you guys are doing after your first rehearsal today. The listeners might not know, but Gary and Byron are launching a musical career. If you listen to a previous episode, Gary proved to be quite a rap star. Byron's got a little more country western leaning, so I think it's going to be a mashup. And you guys will be known as G Money and the Wichita Kid. How you guys doing today?
Well, G Money's doing good. I don't know about the Wichita Kid. He's been riding his horse too long, and I think he's saddle sore.
Yeah, it's G Money instead of Old Man Money and Wichita Kid because that just doesn't sell tickets.
Yeah, definitely. And like we say, Byron's the Wichita Kid. And, if you've ever grappled with him on the mat, he would be like, hey, it's like rolling with a kid.
Yeah, a lot of fun and good times.
Like taking candy from a baby.
But since I'm a rap star and I have my posse with me, nobody will be taking candy from Byron, because we roll deep.
Another way to roll deep is to play some games while you're rolling. And I've got an audiobook called 6 Games for BJJ. They are designed to alter the way you play jiu-jitsu, kind of tinker with your own game, and help you find and develop parts of your game that are just like around the corner that you don't notice. And so these games, you'll be implementing them while you're actually rolling. And your training partners could know or they don't need to know. It doesn't really matter. And I think that this has been a great tool for me to develop my game and find some kind of surprise things that I didn't know were around. And that's really what these games are designed to do. There's 6 of them. The audiobook is about an hour long, a little bit longer. It's $5.99, and you can check it out in the show notes or go to the website, bjjbrick.com, and I'm sure you'll see a little yellowish book cover with some dice. Man, when I have to design my own book cover, it ends up being a picture of dice I took on my table with some font that is in the photo editing program. But the games that have really helped me a lot. I'm always looking for ways to improve my game.
Yeah, so check it out. He's got another auto book on there as well, so check them both out and buy them for yourself or buy them for a friend. Guys, for a long time we've been doing taking a lesson that we learned off the mat and taking it on the mat. This week we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to talk about something that we might learn on the mat and how we can take that out in real life. I think that's one of the values of jiu-jitsu, and most people see it. I was thinking the other day about being stuck in a bad position, for example, bottom side control, with a training partner who's got the ability to keep you there as long as he wants, transition them out if they want. And when you're in that position, you don't just relinquish the position and give up. You still try and make good frames, have good posture, maneuver their weight so it's not as heavy on you, and you're looking for an opportunity that maybe something will come up and you can improve your position. And we find ourselves in life oftentimes where, let's say you're working in a department with a half dozen people and the boss tells everybody there's going to be an opportunity for promotion, and you're the newest guy in the department with the least experience. Realistically, you probably don't have a lot of chance to get that promotion, but you don't just go to work every day and do nothing. I mean, you don't just take no action. You still do the things you can do. Even if you've got very little experience, you can still show up early for work. You can still be the last guy to leave for lunch and the first guy back for lunch. If you got a weekly report due, don't make your boss ask you for it. Make sure it's in on time. I mean, they're just simple things, but when I look at jiu-jitsu and how you can learn things on the mat and take them off the mat, this is the kind of thing that sticks out to me. What do you guys think?
Joe, I think that's the best lesson we've had. And the reason I say it, it's not just a lesson for jiu-jitsu, it's a huge lesson for life. And, I'm thinking not just for your job, it's also works great for school. You think about, your kids or some of us train that are, still in high school or college, turn in your work on time, be the first one to class, stay after class, ask the teacher questions, like what you were saying, be the team player on your team at work, show up early, stay late if you have to, always be the one to volunteer if somebody's sick and you need somebody to stay an extra 30 minutes late. But those little things are going to make you indispensable. And that's kind of like what you want to do at the gym too. Like, I'm definitely not the best grappler by far. I'm slow, I'm old, I can't train hard. I look at what do I bring to the table. And what I try to bring to the table in the gym is I try to be that guy who's going to be there. I try to be the guy who's helping other people. I try to be somebody who's going to be on the mat all the time. And, it's like every little thing you can do to set yourself apart and help others on your team get better, off the mat, on the mat, is just really going to put you ahead of everybody else.
Man, that worked out really good, Gary. I like the way you did that. We started on the mat, took the lesson off the mat, and Gary brought it back on the mat. That's what I call coming full circle.
Yeah, it's just, these are like the things like what you said, Joe, that I'm trying to teach my kids. And, I just look at those lessons that you just talked about that, I think it'll really help my kids when they get older. I mean, for anything they do. And I can just, I'm a huge jiu-jitsu supporter. And the reason I am because of what jiu-jitsu has done for me in life. Jiu-jitsu has taught me those lessons like Joe was talking about. I am better at work because of jiu-jitsu. I use the lessons I've learned on the mat and I take them off the mat. I don't think there's anything tougher than I'm going to do off the mat that I have to do on the mat when Byron's, got side control on me, when Joe's on top of me smashing me. If I can survive that and find a way to get out of it and use perseverance and just guts and just keep going and, you use those lessons off the mat, I'm going to excel, at everything I do. And jiu-jitsu is something that has taught me all that and made me a better person.
I think about the person stuck in side control and it feels like you can't get out. And it may be a situation where you don't have the skills or physical ability to actually escape the person who has you in side control. Like, it's always nice to think, technique will win. If you don't have the technique and the person is stronger than you anyway, and they're playing the game where they won't let you out, you're kind of stuck. But what can you do? Can you make steps towards that goal? You may not reach the goal, but what would be the right thing to do from here? And start working on that. Same thing in life. Like you're saying, like a job promotion might come up and you're not ready for it. You might be handed, the hand of cards in life right now, and there's not a win. There's not even like a good outcome coming your way. But what can you do? What steps can I do to make this a little bit better? What is the correct thing to do? Is a loved one sick or something like that? I can't cure their disease, but what can we do to make this the best we can? And is it going to see this doctor? Or is it being a good spouse or family member or whatever? You do what you can do on the mat and off the mat. And when you're in a tough spot, it's very frustrating. But you don't give up, or when you do that, it's tapping out, and that's perfectly fine. But like in life, you have to work through those tough spots, and I think that jiu-jitsu does build that resiliency and that grit that we tend to rely on off the mat.
You know, the best compliment to me that I've ever received in jiu-jitsu has nothing to do with my technique, has nothing to do with a submission I threw out. When I got my blue belt, and I don't think I was very good at all. But, somebody believed in me and gave me a blue belt. But I think I was awful at that time. And there was a bigger guy that Byron and I trained with who I don't think liked Byron and I. But, he got his blue belt the same day. And I remember him saying, and most people would say that what he said to me would basically mean, you're terrible. But I remember he just said, he's like, man, Gary, you've got a lot of heart. And I looked at it that, I just don't quit. And that was like the best compliment I ever had. Because when I started jiu-jitsu, I was terrible at it. I was awful. And I just remember just getting ragdolled and thrown around all the time. And, hey, speaking of ragdoll, that actually is a game, 6 games for BJJ. Definitely check that out. But, the one thing I always said is like, I am not going to quit this. I'm going to keep going. And when I see somebody really good, I'm always going to, if they don't have people to train with them, if somebody's afraid to train with that person, like sometimes when you're the good person, people don't want to train with you. I always went for that person. I don't care how many times I got tapped out. But that little compliment, even though what he was probably saying was, you're terrible. Because there was nothing was mentioned about skill in the whole 10-second conversation we had. But to me, that meant the world because that's something that you can bring to the table. Even when you're not the best person in the gym, you just show up and you're there. You're there for your teammates and not quitting. I'm just gonna plug away, and that is something that's big that's helped me off the mat. In my career is just just stepping up to the challenge and not quitting and just persevering and going through that brick wall.
Gary, I thought of 2 tangents as you were talking about this. You often remind everybody that you've been training longer than me. You started a couple of months before me. 2 weeks before me.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yep.
We got our blue belts the same. We got our blue belts the same day.
Yeah, you always brag about getting your blue belt 2 weeks before me.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's funny. The other tangent is you said that you didn't feel like you were very good. I was telling somebody the other day that every blue belt that I know is better than I was when I was a blue belt. All of them. They would all tap me out. Not that I didn't feel like I was a blue belt. It's just I think they're training in a room that has a lot more people. There's black belts, brown belts, pro belts, all this, and it's a good atmosphere. And Gary's guys have each other and Gary, and they're a lot more aggressive as far as my style and versus theirs as far as the willing to fire off techniques quickly. All of them are better than I was when I was a blue belt by a lot. Even the smaller ones, when we give a younger person a blue belt, when we give a smaller person a blue belt, they would all beat me pretty easily as far as being able to tap me out. So I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah. I would like to see, remember me and you had to roll against each other when we got our blue belt? I wish somebody would have videotaped that.
That'd
we could have
cool.
watched it, and we could have laughed at it today.
I bet it was pretty awful.
But, Joe, that is a awesome off the mat or on the mat lesson. That one really hit home to me.
Yeah, appreciate your insight. That turned into a bit more conversation than I anticipated. But there's just no end to the amount of things you can learn on the mats that you can take home with you.
Jiu-jitsu is special. I every time I start thinking about stuff like that, I just realize how much jiu-jitsu has done for me and my family. It's made me a better person.
Another way to become a better person is to set goals. And we have a quote this week from Casey Roundtree. Goal set.
I want to stop you real quick. You got some of the best segues here. Episode 241, 242. Are you taking a class or anything, to better yourself?
A segue class?
Your segues are on point, buddy.
Well, thank you, Gary, for noticing. It's just about timing. And with 3 of us on here and not really having an order to the the things that we bring up, I think it makes the segues easier. But thanks for noticing, buddy. I was going to say your hair's looking great today, but I can't see you. But I know that's probably looking better than it did last week. So there's a compliment back at you.
All 7 of them.
But the quote this week is by Casey Roundtree, and it's about goals. Goal setting is a powerful tool and process for motivating you. When effective goals are set, a giant step towards the life you desire is taken. I think that it's so easy to just kind of meander through life and get up, go to work, go to jiu-jitsu, repeat. A weekend has showed up, a weekend is gone. You know what? The year is almost halfway over. Have you reached any goals you wanted this year so far? Did you have any goals? If you make a goal and you even just strive towards that, it could be to lose some weight or to, add this technique to your game, or, goal at work or goal in a relationship you have. If you just make it, you're making the step towards reaching it, opposed to not formally making that goal. The odds of it happening are pretty slim. Joe gave an example a couple weeks ago about, navigating on a ship. If you set sail and don't have a destination, where are you going to go? That's what I think a lot of us are doing. We're just sailing around and don't have a destination. Without that goal, without that place that you want to end up, I think it makes life a little bit harder for you.
Yeah,
definitely.
Do you think Christopher Columbus did not have a goal when he set sail in 1492?
Okay, Gary. I got another quote for you. If you aim for nothing, you'll certainly hit it. I don't know who else said that, but I heard my mom say it countless times growing up. So you are correct. If you don't have any goals, you aren't going anywhere.
What about you guys? Do you set a lot of goals in life, jiu-jitsu, outside of work? Do you guys do that a lot?
Yeah, I set too many, and that's my own fault.
Yeah.
What kind of goals do you set?
I'm trying to write a book right now about taking care of yourself and finding sports that you enjoy. Like jiu-jitsu is definitely part of the backbone of that book. But I'm trying to actually write a book instead of doing an audio book. Super hard. I'm not that talented of a writer. My wife helps me edit it, but I'm not reaching the goal of output that I have wanted to do. That's one of them. I have some professional goals. I want to do some community goals here as far as with my neighborhood. Yeah, I set goals, but I often will tell my wife, hey, guess what else I want to do? And she'll say, what? And I just add another goal, and I can't do them all. I need to triage these goals better and pick ones that are important.
Yeah, I think the biggest area that I would need to improve in is sort of mid to long-term goals. I do pretty well at setting short-term goals. You guys know I work 14 and 14 schedule, and when I'm at work, I have one lifestyle I live, and when I'm at home I have another, so my life is broken up into 14-day blocks. And usually when I go home, I set some goals, a few things around the house. I want to get this and this done. I sort of get together with my wife and look at our schedule, and then I say I want to train this day and that day, and I do pretty good with that stuff. But as far as thinking 6 months out, this is where I'd like to be, that's an area I need to improve.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you Joe, and I don't think I set enough goals. Byron hit a point when he was just talking, do you wake up on Monday, go to work, and all of a sudden, the weekend's done. And sometimes I just wake up and I feel like it's Groundhog Day, everything over and over again. So I think that's something I'm going to work on is setting goals. And you made a good point, Joe, about, if you don't set goals, you're what are you going to achieve? And I think I just need, a little motivation and a little bit of, something to get me to start stepping that way.
Yeah. So just the act of, what this quote is saying is the act of setting that goal is a step in that right direction. And I think with my problem, I set too many, and some of them have to be set on the sidelines. But I think a lot of people don't set any or set enough or set goals challenging enough. But, think about it today. Where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And you would think about that, and you'd be happy with what's going on. And then you could take a step back from that. And what would the step have been before that you reached that goal? And then think back from that and think what was the step before that. And you'll soon find what the next step in your goal is today, or for the week or for the month. And set some goals. You'll navigate a little bit better, and you'll accomplish more things.
Here's something interesting that you might want to consider when setting goals. I heard a guy talking about putting in golf and how to practice and how to get better. And he said it's better to practice over and over at a distance you can make it, as opposed to overly challenging yourself. Because if you're missing 4 or 5 out of 10, then that's what you're getting used to. And if you shoot from a few feet closer to the hole, and you get used to making them, you get used to the sound of the ball dropping in the hole. And I think the same can be true with goals. If you're not careful, if you set unrealistic goals, then you become in the habit of not meeting your goals, and that can be pretty detrimental.
Yeah, that's great. I think of the same thing. You could do it with jiu-jitsu. If the goal is unreasonable, or like the putting, the goal is I think they call it a hole instead of a goal. but to sink that putt, if it's too far away for you to actually learn from that, you're going to be struggling more, and you're more likely to break the solid technique that you need to use. Think of baseball. If you got a pitcher throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs at you, you're going to start doing things that are incorrect. You're going to be reaching for that ball. You're going to be, scared of the ball, or I don't know. I never had somebody throw a ball that fast towards me, but I know that I wouldn't swing correctly, and I wouldn't be able to perform, what the coach is telling me to do. If I'm trying to hit a 100-mile-an-hour baseball, I'm going to be coming unglued. And if you're rolling with somebody who doesn't give you an inch, and you're just desperately fighting for things, at some point your technique is going out the window largely, and you're just struggling. Same thing with your goals. If your goals are too far, too distant, and too much of a struggle, you might end up affecting other parts of your life, or having that struggle be worse. But that, I guess we've wrapped up the quote and also went on some tangents as well. But that's always a good quote. This leads us a few different places that we don't see coming. I tell you what's coming next is our interview with Laurence Griffiths.
He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
He is so good at getting hooks in that he won the 2012 Bassmaster Classic without using a rod or a reel. He washes his belt, yet somehow it retains all the knowledge he has gained. He attended a woman's-only seminar, and his only disguise was his charm. It took 2 hours for someone to notice his beard.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Laurence Griffiths to the BJJ Brick podcast. Now, Laurence has a website, bjjstrength.com. We're going to be talking a lot about strength, conditioning, jiu-jitsu. He's also a black belt under Roger Gracie. Laurence, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to speak to you, and glad to be here.
Laurence, now that's just a little bit about your history of jiu-jitsu and where people can go to find your website. But give us a little introduction about who you are, what you're up to, and maybe what got you started in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so Laurence Griffiths. If you can't understand me, apologies. There's no subtitles with podcasts. but I grew up in Wales, in the UK. You may have guessed Irish, Australian, Scottish, maybe South African. I've got a little bit of Irish blood in me and Scottish blood, but from Wales in the UK. And I currently reside in Southern California. Moved over here a couple of years ago. My wife is from the San Diego area, and I've been, I suppose, always been a sports fan, always been someone that's pretty active. Played rugby for many years. To the American audience, rugby is that crazy sport that's a bit like American football, but without helmets. It started jiu-jitsu when I think I was 25 years old, and I'm 35 now. and I was at university, coming towards the end of my university time, or the end of my time at university. And a buddy of mine was, do you want to come and train some MMA at the time? It was an MMA school that we went to, a place called Leicester Shoot Fighters. And, we'd been watching the UFC on TV, and it was about that time, at least in the UK, 2007-ish, 2007, 2008, where MMA was becoming popular. And I was like, great, yeah, let's go and give that a go. Rugby's a pretty rough sport, so I thought, a bit of MMA would be good fun too. And then did 1 or 2 striking classes, and then did the grappling, is what we called it then. Didn't really know the term Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as much, and I did 1 or 2 of those classes, and I said bye-bye to striking pretty much. In terms of most of my effort, and then haven't really looked back since. And that was in a city called Leicester in England, where I went to university, and then moved to London probably about 6 months after that, and played rugby for about 3 to 4 months when I first moved to London. It was the natural default, and a lot of my friends had moved there as well. And I went to went to the nearest jiu-jitsu school that was near my office where I was working, and it happened to be one of the Roger Gracie academies. I had no idea who he was at the time. It was and still is, and a guy called Cesar Lima, who's now a second-degree black belt under Roger, and just happened to walk into that academy, and I'd sent a message to the guy that ran the school I went to in Leicester, and said, who's this Roger guy? And he was like, yeah, he's pretty decent. So to kind of fell on my feet a little bit there. And yeah, I've always been a real active competitor, done as much as I can in terms of getting out and doing a lot of competitions in the UK, traveling to the Europeans, and doing quite a few now here in the US. And it's just, I think, like everyone listening to this podcast, right, jiu-jitsu it's like an infection almost, right? It gets into you and you can't get rid of it, but it's a good infection, and it's an addiction. I love it. And for me, the whole kind of strength and conditioning side is that coming from rugby's far more an attribute-based sport. Like if you spoke to someone that did American football at a good level and they didn't do any strength and conditioning work, you'd be gobsmacked. It's a little bit similar in that respect. So I just naturally thought, well, how can I apply what I know from that sport into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And I think obviously the learning, I've done a bit more formal education around it, and what the stuff that I do is very, very different. But that's kind of, I suppose, that's me and how I got into it. And I suppose one thing I'd add, I was making some notes as we were just starting off or chatting before we were recording. I'm a big proponent of strength and conditioning, or supplemental physical conditioning outside jiu-jitsu, but I'm never a proponent of using strength over good technique. And I think I don't think people maybe mistake that with me. And I've always been very conscious. I'm like 6'3" and 210 pounds. I fight in the super heavyweight category, and right from the start, from jiu-jitsu for me was like I didn't want to be that big guy. I didn't want to be that big guy that comes in and relies on strength. So, I talk about using strength and conditioning, but I also, when I'm actually teaching jiu-jitsu classes, it's very much technique always over strength. So yeah, that's a bit of a long-winded intro, but that's me and some of my philosophy, I suppose.
Yeah, Laurence, trying to get to know you a little bit better. Can you think of a time when you decided to become an authority figure on strength and conditioning? Maybe your conditioning or something like failed you and you were motivated, or maybe you saw it make a difference in somebody else you were helping.
Yeah, I do. It's a great question. My first ever jiu-jitsu competition, and I was a white belt. I'd been a white belt for, I think, 3 or 4 months, maybe a little longer. And it was, I think, a group of about 10 of us had traveled to this competition in a city called Bristol, which is in England, where we were living. So we'd got up early in the morning and taken, well, they got up early in the morning and took the bus there about 5 o'clock. My uncle lived in this city, so I traveled up the night before and ended up having about I think I had about 5 or 6 beers, or 5 or 6 pints of Guinness for my uncle the night before, which wasn't the best idea, but it just kind of happened. So I turned up maybe not in the best shape for this jiu-jitsu tournament, and it was I was fighting at super heavyweight, and I had 3 fights. And super heavyweight, 3 fights, at least in the UK at that time, was a lot of fights for a white belt competition. And the one thing that I managed to take gold and was, brilliant. Okay, you're really happy and you're ecstatic. And I remember my coach Caesar running onto the mat and picking me up, and all that was really cool. But the thing that stuck with me the most was my grips and my forearms. They were dead. I just remember, I'm looking at my hands now, and my hands were like claws. I could barely straighten my fingers out, and I'm pretty sure that everyone that's competed in jiu-jitsu or even just trained jiu-jitsu has experienced that at some point. And for me, something just kind of went off in my head, was like, I need to train my grips. I don't want to feel like that ever again, where almost you can't even, you move my hands. And that was, I think that's what kicked me off in thinking, okay, I need to adjust the strength and conditioning that I have been doing based on my rugby background, and think about, okay, really what's specific to jiu-jitsu. And it was really simple at the time. All I did was hang off a pull-up bar. And in fact, it's something I still do with different variations. But that feeling of my arms just almost feeling like they're going to fall off my body was horrible. And I thought, I've got to do something to fix this. So yeah, I think that's what really triggered it for me.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think anybody who's competed, especially those first few, that's a common thing to experience, is just your forearms are on fire, especially when the match is over and you have another match coming up. It's like, man, I can't even feel my hands. I can't even move them. Like, it's just, I think people are squeezing super hard when they don't need to the entire match. I don't know anything other than that. I want to ask you, there's a little bit of hesitation sometimes people have with jiu-jitsu and strength, just because they kind of sometimes will butt heads, and people get frustrated with people that are using too much strength on the mat, and they're getting muscled around, and they, I don't know, it can be frustrating for people who are training to experience that, and like, well, he's not that good, he's just so much stronger. But really, what can being a more athletic or having strength and conditioning on your side do for you to help you get better at BJJ?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to look at, and I think the first thing I would say to people is that we all love jiu-jitsu, right? I'm expecting if you're listening to this podcast, you love jiu-jitsu, and when you love something, you want to do it for as much as you can for as long as possible, and obviously training smart, etc. So just looking at just the general benefits of strength and conditioning is that I've got a list here, and I'll try and hopefully I remember them all, but it improves your bone density. It's going to improve lean muscle mass. It's going to boost your hormone production. All things that help you live healthier and live longer. Let's forget the jiu-jitsu side of things. There's even research that having higher grip strength actually means you're going to, or it doesn't mean you're going to live longer, but some studies have shown that people with higher grip strength tend to live longer. That's, if you dive into it, it's probably to do with the kind of lifestyle you lead to get that grip strength that makes you live longer, not just the grip strength. So just aside from jiu-jitsu on its own, being in good shape and strength training in particular you're more likely to live a longer, healthier life. So that in itself is going to help keep you on the mats longer. And then when you look at stuff like, all of the imbalances that you get from training jiu-jitsu. So, we do a lot of gripping, as we just talked about, and then, pulling our opponent towards us. So we tend to work all of the muscles on the inside of our arms. And then when people get stuff like tendonitis in the elbow is a very, very common one. A lot of tendonitis is to do with overworked muscles or muscles that are too weak, and the strain goes onto the tendons rather than the muscles. So good strength training can help you overcome some of those imbalances, and that's just one example. And so again, it's another thing that's going to help keep you on the mats for longer. And then in terms of injuries, right, and injury prevention, that strength training has got a really strong, correlation with prevention of injuries. So over and above just the wear and tear with stuff like tendonitis, the more kind of, you post out in a funny direction and something tweaks, the stronger you are and the stronger your joints are, the more likely you are to protect against that stuff. And then you can get into the whole kind of performance side of things. People tend to think that, strength and conditioning is, well, okay, the example people say Marcelo Garcia doesn't strength train, he just rolled jiu-jitsu. But the question you got to ask yourself is, if he had done strength and conditioning, would he have been even better? And if I looked at some of the top athletes, or the top 10 male black belt athletes ranked in IBJJF, and just looking at their social media, 8 out of the 10 of them, you can see examples of them doing strength and conditioning. So if the best competitors are in the world are doing it, then it's probably gonna help with your performance in jiu-jitsu. And I don't think, okay, if you do a strength train the wrong way, you do the wrong kind of exercises, you've got a poor program, you don't do mobility work in addition to it to help keep yourself supple, then maybe it can impact your jiu-jitsu. But there's very few arguments that I've been convinced with why strength and conditioning would hurt your jiu-jitsu. It's so common in every other sport, but with jiu-jitsu we tend to have this almost it can be taboo in some respects. So when you bring all of that together, it's not going to make your jiu-jitsu better, but it should make you better at executing the jiu-jitsu that you do know, and it's going to keep you healthy. Should keep you healthier for longer if you do it in the smart way, and keep you on the mats for longer. And I think ultimately that's what we all want.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you give that example, the classic example of Marcelo Garcia. He just trains. He trains a lot, and he's doing what he could do with that. Mm-hmm. My common thought is, I can't train that much for several reasons. We don't have that many opportunities to train. I'm often could go. I'm at work for a lot of times, and I'm not able to get to the mats. So 4 times a week is about as great of a week as I could produce. But there's other days in that week that I'm not able to train. But I don't need the class to be meeting together to do strength and conditioning training. I could do that anytime. I could get up earlier. I could stay up a little bit later. I could, have a shorter lunch time, or you could just make it happen a lot easier as well. And if I was able to train anytime I wanted to, jiu-jitsu wise, that's a lot. That's really cool. But I'm not in that environment. And so I do have time that I could work out, or I could not work out, but I can't do jiu-jitsu at certain times. Like right now, there's no jiu-jitsu in this whole city I'm in right now. At this time, I'm on the phone with you. So I'm not missing that opportunity, but I could be doing some more exercise if I wanted to be. And so I just like that time freedom, and the fact that you don't have to have a group of 2 or 3 or 10 or 30 people there to help train with you. You can just go train. And I think those are big things that are often overlooked as far as like reality. I can't train anytime I want, but I can't train jiu-jitsu anytime I want, but I can make any time work on my schedule to go get in a little bit better shape. Yeah,
and you've got if you're training jiu-jitsu twice a day, 5 times a week, and you're a full-time jiu-jitsu athlete, that's great. But that's such a small percentage of people. It's got to be 90, 97, 98% of people are like you and I, right? You've got other commitments. You're hitting the mats whenever you can, but you're not full-time. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? It's very easy to supplement the time that you're not able to make it on the mat. And I forget who the guest's name was, but the guy that talks about BJJ for people over 40. I was listening to that show, and when you were interviewing him, he had a really good point where, as you get better at jiu-jitsu, you should be using less force and less effort. And particularly if you're in a school where you're one of the highest belts there, and you're rolling with a lot of white, blue and purple belts, that, don't get me wrong, right, they can be extremely tough, but over time the amount of force that you use becomes less and less. So some people will also use the argument that jiu-jitsu makes you stronger. It will, to a point, but unless you can continue to increase the resistance and increase the force, it's not going to make you stronger, right? And if actually you become more efficient at jiu-jitsu, you use less force, actually the strength benefits you're going to get over time are going to reduce. So it becomes even more important to add it in. And to use an example, we've got a guy that trains with us, a guy called John Davis, and I want to say he's 50. He might hit me for saying that, but I'm pretty sure he's 50. He's 50 now, and he's a purple belt, and I believe got into jiu-jitsu only in the last 4 or 5 years. I need to check, right? So a lot later than a lot of people. But he's been a strength and conditioning coach for quite some time. Big proponent of kettlebells, and is in great shape, right? He put a lot of 21-year-olds to shame, and he's 50, and I outweigh him by a good, I think, 20 or 30 pounds. But there are people that would tap me all the time, right? And people that give me a much harder time technically, but from a physical perspective, like John's technical as well, don't let me take that away from him, but from a physical perspective, he's one of the oldest guys there and gives me one of the toughest times physically, and is on the mats all the time because he's looked after his body, right? He's stayed healthy and he stayed strong, and you can feel the difference when you row with him.
You said a couple of things there that I hadn't really thought about. As far as I get better at jiu-jitsu, which I think I am, slowly but surely, I may be using less and less strength and energy to perform my game. And I'm taken out of my game less and less as well. Aside from playing around and working different positions. If I look at my game, it is getting, I'm continuing doing the things that are most efficient and least amount of effort, least amount of energy, and higher success rates. And that is making, I probably could continue to do this and have slightly better results as the years go by, but I wouldn't be as, physically, I think I would somehow decline a bit because my game is becoming more efficient. So if I could make my, I think it's just the way I'm training, and I think that's common for people to just do things you're good at and keep working that. But long term, I don't want to lose the ability to turn it up or to work far outside my game and not get super tired. And that's why, that off the mat training, there's another benefit to that, is because as you become better and better at jiu-jitsu, if you're anything like me, you become lazier and you don't have to push yourself as hard. And it's good to be able to have that ability, because I know for sure there are some rolls in 5 minutes I get really tired, and sometimes I could roll for 30 minutes and not get pushed that hard. Yeah,
and in an ideal scenario, perfect jiu-jitsu is almost effortless. And people say you don't use strength, but you just, when people say strength, people think big movements, powerful movements, moving a lot of weight, moving a lot of force. Just to walk takes strength. It's just a much lower level of strength. So you can't move your body without having some level of strength. So it's to say that you don't use any strength at all I think is wrong, and perfect jiu-jitsu should almost seem effortless and be more, as efficient as possible. But just thinking of, you still get into some, pretty difficult positions. Maybe, you someone goes to sweep you and you base your arm out to stop a sweep, or a leg, and it's a bit of a funny angle. If you're not, haven't prepared your body to go into those kind of positions, then I personally think you're more likely to be injured in those kind of situations. And the right kind of, I say strength training, even if you just do something as simple as, I say simple, right? Yoga's not simple. Yoga's quite complex. I don't want to say that it's just strength training, but some kind of supplemental work off the mat, because of all the different positions, all of the hunched over bent positions that we end up in jiu-jitsu. People talk about good posture, but often you've got to really hunch down, right, to stop yourself being choked out, or whatever the case may be. And something just to kind of rebalance the body. Or let's say that you fight on, I know my preference when I'm fighting mostly, in most guard positions, is my right hip is down and my left hip is up. So I'm using one side of my body very differently to the other. Yeah. So does that lead to imbalances in my body? And should I do something to try and correct that. And probably you should, because I've got a bit of a lower back problem. Well, have you got a lower back problem, or are your lower abs too weak, or your hips too tight? So just simple stuff to help rebalance, and ultimately it's all about complementing your jiu-jitsu and making you feel healthier so you can enjoy jiu-jitsu more.
Yeah, the healthier thing is a big thing for staying on the mat and having that consistency. I remember I was reading a book, and it was about brain trauma and concussions, and one of the bigger factors as far as whether you got a concussion or not, for getting hit this hard, was the size of your neck. The bigger, the stronger your neck, the less likely your brain was going to actually take damage. And
really?
And I think that's a good example for your whole body. I mean,
yeah.
It could go too far one way or the other, but if you're fairly athletic and you have muscle in your body or your neck, it helps protect you from things. And I think that's as you were saying that, it was kind of me thinking like, yeah, that's an example of actually helping your brain by the size of your neck. And they were looking at, I don't know if they were looking at rugby players or American football players or whatever, boxing. The bigger your neck, the less your brain gets rattled around.
That's interesting.
Basically, I don't remember. I need to find out the name of that book, but basically most sports are not safe. And he was recommending table tennis as a safe sport. But you also mentioned in the discussion, I'm taking notes here as we're going, as Marcelo Garcia, we were talking about that, he's just rolling. It made me think about, who's he rolling with? He's got Bernardo Faria there and a bunch of amazing athletes. But if he goes and does off the mat training, which he's the black sheep in that, he's the one that doesn't do that. But look at your world champions. When they go train, they are training with the best of the best. They've got those teammates there. Not anything against my teammates. Most of them are not at that caliber. That's being nice. But if I go to the gym or I do something at home that's a fitness routine, or a bench or a pull-up bar or a kettlebell, whatever, I could do the same thing they're doing if I know how, and get basically the same results. Yeah. And I can't mirror what they're doing on the mat with their teammates, but I can mirror parts. I can mirror their diet. I could mirror, maybe mirroring the diet's not the right thing to do as far as, my body's different than theirs, but there's some things you can copy and there's some things you can't. And I think you'd go a long ways by emulating what they're able to do off the mat, like strength and conditioning training, and then it leaves a category as far as on the mat training, which, you do your best that you have with where you are, but I think if you bring all the other categories up to the speed, I think you'll be a lot better off.
I've never thought about it that way. That's a great point, actually. And I think you can, to bring your jiu-jitsu up to the same level against, any of those competitors could take years, maybe a decade, right? In some cases, depending on how experienced they are. But you could, with a smart program, get in the same physical condition, maybe in 12 to 18 months, maybe shorter, depending on what your baseline is. And it gives me a lot of confidence from a competitive perspective. And not everyone likes to compete, but a lot of people do. That if I can personally step on the mat or train someone up to be able to step on the mat and know that their physical conditioning is not an issue, I think it's a real confidence boost, and then it's just down to the jiu-jitsu. And, partly the conditioning, a lot of the fitness comes from training on the mat. It's not just off the mat, and I'm actually a big proponent of the CV stuff or the cardiovascular fitness come in predominantly from being on the mat, but the strength side kind of off the mat. Like, it gives you a lot of confidence stepping on and knowing that, physically, you may be better than me technically, and this is jiu-jitsu, right? And then maybe you'll win, but you're not going to be better than me physically. And it's surprising how many people I speak to, and one of the biggest worries that they have going into a competition is that they're going to burn out and run out of energy. Not that the technique's not going to be good enough, but they're going to burn out. And you can prepare just by doing stuff on the mat as well, but the supplemental stuff with strength and conditioning, I think, is definitely helps, because the stronger you are, the less effort you use to perform the same movements, and the less effort you use, the more energy you've got, etc., etc.
Yeah, and the fear of burning out is definitely there for competitors, but something that helps, I think, people kind of overcome that fear is you're not typically accumulating damage like you would be in MMA. So if you're a lot bigger and stronger than me, but if we're going to put on the gloves and do MMA, I'm going to quickly not be able to walk the same, and I'll be like, I'm going to accumulate damage. Not that I'm tired. My body is hurting now. And in jiu-jitsu, that's fairly rare to actually damage somebody like that. That's not really not we're trying to submit them. But I'm not throwing out leg kicks and trying to get you to limp or body shots. And so it's either your cardiovascular system is failing or the stress level is too high and you're not able to calm yourself and get you to perform like you do at the on the mats at your school.
Yeah, I heard a very good saying that I tell it to myself a lot. I forget where it came from. But it's about preparing for a competition and thinking to yourself, okay, if I was to fight this person in a closed gym, just me and them and a referee, and nobody would know the result, how would I feel about it? Would I be as nervous? And typically the answer is going to be no. And then you can boil down all of the nervousness, or a lot of the nervous, down to social pressure. It's that fear of losing, and not so much the fear of losing, but the fear of people knowing that you've lost. And it becomes a real social thing, and rather than necessarily, anything else. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's I have a whole list of questions here, but that's a good example, and that's a common fear. But the social pressure you're putting on yourself is not real. We've talked about this on the show before. I like to call it the 20-40-60 rule. When you're 20, you care what people think about you. It's an important thing. When you're 40, you don't care what people think about you. And by the time you hit 60, you realize nobody's thinking about you at all. Like literally, it's just you worried about that image. They're worried about their own lives, their own problems, and very few people are concerned about you, especially ones that don't love or care for you. Like, you're concerned about how you look when you lose. Yeah, that lasts like 4 minutes for most people, and then they don't care anymore. Yeah, you lost that match, but you're going to dwell on it for years. Like, that's ridiculous. And so that's a good way to help melt that stress. So I do want to get into some of the meatier ideas as far as how do you recommend people train for jiu-jitsu off the mat? So like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, so one of the most common questions that I get is going to be, what conditioning do I need to do off the mat? Is the first thing people think about. They rarely think about the strength aspect. And we can break this down into various categories, but broadly, let's talk about strength, mobility, and conditioning. Power and explosiveness and speed, I think, follows after strength. But to keep it simple, I think about conditioning, mobility, and strength. In terms of conditioning, I think if you're already on the mats 4 or 5 times a week, you should be getting enough conditioning, and the best conditioning you can for jiu-jitsu, which is jiu-jitsu. There's going to be exceptions. Maybe you're injured at the moment and you're doing the drills, but you're not sparring, or you're in a school where you don't get that much sparring in, or you're away from the mat, you're traveling. But if you're getting 4 or 5 sessions a week of good rolls in, probably the conditioning aspect should be lower down your list of priorities. I think then, next on that list of priorities should be strength work. And we've talked about all the benefits, the general benefits of strengthening conditioning, like increased hormone production, increased bone density, prevention of injury, etc. So getting that base is going to be really important for you. But more importantly, how do you strength train for jiu-jitsu? I'm a big proponent of bodyweight exercises.
Okay.
And also kettlebells, which we can talk about specifically. But at the same time, some people like lifting weights, and the method or other forms of strength and conditioning. And the method you use is maybe less important. Maybe it's a lot more to do with how much you enjoy a certain type of training, how accessible it is to you. If you live in the middle of nowhere, maybe all you can get is a pull-up bar and kettlebells, but maybe you've got a great work gym where you've got the equipment already. But what's more important is training movements rather than lifts and muscles. So everyone will say to you, well, yeah, you just got to do the squat, deadlift, and bench press. Now, those 3 exercises on their own are fantastic exercises, and that just as a program is going to serve you well and serve you well for many years. But it's more important to think about the movements, and there are, in my mind, I forget the number of them, but I think it's 6 or 7 core movements that we are performing in jiu-jitsu that you need to train. So think about stuff like the leg drive. So a squat is a leg drive motion. So let's say you're moving around your opponent trying to pass the guard on your feet, or you're driving off your legs as you're trying to put pressure into someone when you're passing. It's a leg drive motion. Then you've got the hip drive motion, where let's say you're sprawling or you're putting pressure into someone when you're on top. Then you can go into core stability and core rotation. I think you need to separate those 2 things. Was like core stability would be doing something like the plank, and core stability is important for any sporting endeavor, right? If your core is strong, it allows you to transfer power from one part of your body to the other. More importantly, let's say you're pushing off with your feet and driving into an opponent when you're passing. A strong core is going to allow you to better transfer that power through your body and into your opponent. So core stability is important, but people often forget, I think, core rotation. If you could almost do, to train one thing, rotational core strength may be the most important thing for jiu-jitsu. People talk about hip movement, but what's powering that hip movement? It's rotation of the core that powers the hip movement. And then you've got the upper body stuff, which would be an upper body pushing motion. If you're pushing off the floor or pushing away from your opponent, which is, pushing your opponent is not necessarily always good technique, but you need to be strong in that position. And then holding on to your opponent and then pulling them close to you. So those, I think there's 6 movements, right? You've got the leg drive, you've got the hip drive, you've got core stability, core rotation, an upper body push, and an upper body pull movement. The stuff like, training neck strength, I think grip strength, doing some balance work and ankle and foot strength is important as well for jiu-jitsu, because we do so little of it, because we spend so much time on our backs. But those stuff become more supplemental. I think the other movements are the core 6 core movements that we're performing most of the time in jiu-jitsu. And that's what I like to think about. It's like with any sport, you think about what are the most important movements that someone is performing in a particular sport. Let's take baseball as an example. Rotational strength, right, is massively important in baseball. Particularly if you're a fielder, a pitcher, or a hitter, right? You can easily see that it's that rotational strength and rotational power that generates most of the force. So we need to think about at least I think about jiu-jitsu in the same way. And then let's take one example and take the leg drive motion. Now, a squat develops a fantastic leg drive motion. Squatting is amazing for a whole host of reasons, but you could also do a pistol squat, for example, where you just on one leg, or you could do a pistol squat holding a kettlebell. And those are just 2 other examples that are great for developing strength. That doesn't necessarily need to be a true barbell squat. So I'm thinking more about the movement rather than necessarily the muscles, and then how you train them particularly for strength work. You've got to think about, at least for the big movements like the leg drive, the hip drive, the upper body pull and upper body push, is a rep range of 5 to 6 reps for 3 to 5 sets. And the research has shown that's the most optimal. Most optimal for developing strength. So you could be doing, say, 2 to 3 reps at the start, but once you hit the 5 or 6 reps for 3 to 5 sets, and you can go above that, your body is no longer developing strength, or let's say the load is not as optimal for developing strength. You then get into stuff like building muscle, or you go past then 10 to 12 reps, then you go into muscular endurance. So the reason that I say it's more important to focus on the 5 or 6 reps, or up to 5 or 6 reps, is because when you think of jiu-jitsu, it's a lot of high repetitions. You very rarely do, big movements you can only perform 4 or 5 times. You pull in and grab, and you pull in and grab, and you're doing it over and over and over. So you're using slightly different energy systems for those kind of movements as opposed to doing 5 or 6 repetitions. So they complement each other a little bit better, and it's strength work can be, tough to recover from, but stuff like building muscle mass, 8 or 9 or 10 reps to failure is much more difficult to recover from, and much more likely, in my opinion, to impact your jiu-jitsu the same day or the next day.
Laurence, you have some videos online. You can find most of them, I think, through your website or maybe on your YouTube channel. But if someone is going to go out and get a kettlebell, like it's brand new to somebody, say, I don't know if it matters, maybe an example of somebody who weighs like 150 pounds, or maybe somebody who weighs like 180. I don't pick something, and like, what should they get if they're just going to get one?
Yeah, so you've got, if you go on to bjjstrength.com into the blog section, and then under categories, kettlebells, there's a host of stuff, and there's a particular article, or one specific article that talk about the different weights that you should consider buying. And the rule of thumb, and that doesn't come from me, it comes from a guy called Pavel Tsatsouline, who's like pretty much the godfather of kettlebells, a Russian guy, but the godfather of kettlebells in America. And he talks about, for most men, starting off, let's say you're of average weight, average height, and average athletic ability, 24 kilos, which I believe is about 50 pounds.
Yeah.
It would be the best way to start off with. If you're maybe on the larger side, maybe you're above 200 pounds, and you're already, you consider very strong. So let's say you can deadlift double your own body weight. You can bench press your own body weight. You can do, you can quite easily do, say, 10 pull-ups. Then probably a 32 kilo one would be more appropriate. Then if you're female, take off probably 8 kilos on each of those. So it would be, for a female of average athletic ability, average size, probably 16 kilos is a good one to start with. And if you're above average size and above average strength, then maybe 32 kilos. I'd rarely recommend anyone, unless they're very small and very weak, to go lower than those weights, because I think you'll progress through it very quickly. And there's always some exercises that you can do, even when the kettlebell seems heavy, to build up that strength relatively quickly, and then allow yourself to get into the most complex exercises. And I think in terms of exercises, let's just keep it simple. Let's imagine that you've only got a very limited amount of time to strength train. Kettlebell swings, starting off with 2 hands and then gradually building up to doing stuff with 1 hand, and Turkish get-ups. Those are 2 exercises that you're going to work pretty much every single muscle in your body, and it will give you the biggest bang for your buck. If you had to do just one, I would probably say the Turkish get-up, because it's a great exercise for, maybe, not as good for something like the hip drive, which is important in jiu-jitsu, but in a way it forces you to use your body as one entire unit, and gives you that kind of, I don't know how you describe this strength, but it's almost like your body feels wired together. Everything feels tight and like it's working as it should be. It's gonna give you so much impact for one simple exercise. Yeah,
and you mentioned basically the 2 that exercises I'm most familiar with, the Turkish get up and a basic kettlebell swing. And yeah, you see a lot of like full body things going on. I could do a kettlebell swing for a little while, and then put it down, it's like, I am breathing heavy. I didn't even realize how hard I was working. My legs are all tight and sore. It's like, I don't know, something about that. I don't, maybe I don't push myself enough, but when I put it down, it's like, man, I can feel it.
Tough exercise.
Yeah, it's really good, and it doesn't take a real long time to get really good effects from that.
Yeah, and you talked about full body type. I think you mentioned full body type workouts, and you see a lot of those programs and where you're doing, high repetitions and you're doing loads of exercises back to back. And I've got 1 or 2 videos like that on my website as well. But I think, that kind of stuff it's great. You're then coming out of the rep range of that's most optimal for developing strength. It's not to say that it's not going to make your body stronger by doing those high rep ranges and doing back-to-back sets and doing those circuits. But I think it can be a little bit harder to recover from that kind of workout, and you may feel it a lot more the next day. If you're only doing jiu-jitsu 2 or 3 times a week, then those circuits are fantastic to keep your conditioning up. But if you're already doing a lot of jiu-jitsu, just consider that those kind of workouts maybe it's a little bit more energy intensive, and you may feel it a little more when you're on the mats the next day.
You feel it, so you're recommending the kind of an off schedule as far as mixing your on the mat days with the off the mat days, or how do you blend that?
It kind of depends on a person's schedule, really. I think I'm a big proponent of exercising, 5 days a week, and having 2 rest days thrown in there. Because it's particularly the older you get, the harder it is to recover. And those rest days could be maybe you've got a rest day on a Wednesday and a rest day on a Sunday. Depends how you want to throw it in. Okay. But I think I'm a big proponent of doing that. So let's say you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, jiu-jitsu, then Tuesday and Thursday would be great days to throw in the strength and conditioning work. If you're doing jiu-jitsu 4 or 5 times a week, then you're probably going to need to double up on some of those days. And I would say it's better to double up on some days than it would be, let's say, do 5 days of jiu-jitsu and then 2 separate days of strength and conditioning, because you're working 7 days a week. One of the things that you'll want to consider is that try to have at least 4 hours between your strength and conditioning and your jiu-jitsu, or whichever one is first, because at least the research says that high intensity exercise will spike your cortisol levels, and it will take about 4 hours for those to come back down to normal. So the more stressed that your body is going to be, then the more likely you are to run into stuff like overtraining, where you start feeling, run down, you feel stressed, you feel a bit depressed, maybe you can't sleep because you're just overtaxing the central nervous system. So try and have at least 4 hours. But then there's times when, I've done this and I know people that do this. It's not ideal, but if all you can do is there's a pull-up bar at my gym, and I can get in, twice a week, I can just do 10 minutes of pull-ups. Not continuous, but whatever, maybe in sets. 10 minutes would be a long time, and that's all you can do. Then it's not ideal, but it's better than not doing it at all. So, I like to talk about in ideal scenarios, but I remember, for a lot of the time when I was in London, where I would be, my job was, based in an office as opposed to like working from home. So it's a lot harder to get to training. So you've got to commute into the city, get to your job, commute to training, and someone throws, a call in your diary at 5:30, and you've got to take that call, and you're on the phone then till like say 6:30, and training starts at 6. Takes you 20 minutes to get to jiu-jitsu, but all you can do is, one roll. That's all I could get in, and I would do that all the time. And this is even when I was a brown belt, if I could just get 1 5-minute roll in and good roll in, it's better than not doing it at all. And I think it can be the same with strength and conditioning. You've got ideal situations that you want to work towards, but it's life's not ideal, right? Stuff gets in the way. So if you can just squeeze in a set of pull-ups twice a week after jiu-jitsu, it's going to be better than not doing anything at all.
Yeah, the ideal situation, I've got that 4-hour window, or at least that. What do I do in that time?
To in between the training session?
Let's say I'm pushing it. I do have, it's literally it's 4 hours. I just got done working out with, kettlebells or doing something, and then I'm going to hit the mats in
4 hours time.
4 hours. Yeah, what should I be doing in between?
Hydration is probably the most important thing. Making sure you're getting enough water in there. And I like to put Himalayan sea salt in the water, because it's so full of minerals and helps your body absorb that water a lot better. which is a great way to do it. But one of the things that I think people often overlook, like we can touch on nutrition real quickly, but bringing the central nervous system back down, right? You really spike your central nervous system. You've worked out hard. You've raised your heart rate. Your body's on high alert. And just trying to relax. I know it sounds really cliched is not the right word, but a really simple piece of advice. But trying to kind of bring yourself back down to a much lower level of arousal is going to help your body recover a lot quicker. I'm a big proponent of meditation. I don't really talk about it on the site, but meditation is a good way to maybe just 10 minutes, just kind of some breathing exercises to bring your body back down to its normal baseline. It's going to help you recover a lot quicker. Then when you in terms of nutrition, I think it's important to have good nutrition, but sometimes the timing of that nutrition immediately after a workout can be a little bit, I think, overemphasized. So you'll see marketed, well, you've got to have a recovery shake with 50 grams of carbohydrates, or 100 grams of carbohydrates and 50 grams of protein, and you can do that, and that is going to help with the recovery. And if you're a full-time athlete training the next day and training a couple of times each day and 5 days a week, then getting that nutrition in straight after your training is going to be very, very important. But I think for most people where they're jiu-jitsu 3-4 times a week, adding in some strength and conditioning, getting maybe a protein shake or some good protein in within that hour or two after your training is going to be important, maybe a little bit of fruit. But I'm a big proponent of trying to hold off a lot of your carbohydrate intake and for your evening meal, which is very, very good for weight management, because when you consider that one of the biggest problems in terms of weight management, or at least in my opinion, and you look at a lot of research, is overeating carbohydrates, whether it's in a good form or whether it's in the form of sugar, whatever the case may be. Apparently based on what I've been reading and have heard, that if you maintain or keep your carbohydrate intake until the evening meal, and then during the day you stick into proteins and fats and vegetables and those kind of things, then it can keep your body in a fat burning state for a lot longer, as opposed to kind of constantly eating carbohydrates. And for most people, you're going to find that you will still have enough carbohydrate in your system to train the next day, if you have, and maybe later on, if you've had it in your evening meal, because your body's had time to process it and store it in the muscles. And I'll talk about just my personal experience, and this is not necessarily something that everyone should do. I train just the way my routine works, right? I get up at 6 in the morning, I'll do my strength and conditioning first thing, and you get it done within about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and then I train jiu-jitsu about 10 o'clock, so it's roughly that 4-hour window. And all I have in between then is coffee with butter and coconut oil. I don't actually have my first proper meal until about midday or 12:30. Now that works for me, and it's not for everyone, but it just kind of challenges that idea of good nutrition is important, right? And I talk about this a lot, but don't get caught up too much in, I've got to get the latest muscle recovery shake, and I've got to have it immediately after training. I've got to eat 6 times a day and keep my metabolism up. All of this stuff that's being given to us mainly because someone's trying to market a product. I think if it's where it comes from, right? And it's when you break it down, I think as long as you're avoiding processed foods as much as possible, you're eating plenty of vegetables, you're eating the right amount of protein, which is probably about 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight for most people that do jiu-jitsu. Sorry, let me just hang this up. For most people, you get enough you're hydrating enough. That's going to be enough for 90% of people. The rest of the stuff is just small percentage points, and I think mostly try and save your money for better things.
Yeah, they are marketing something to you, and it's important to realize that when they have the perfect thing for what you need afterwards.
Yeah. And it's not to say that post-workout nutrition is not important, but play with what feels best for you and your body, because digesting food takes a lot of energy. There's a reason that why we, as soon as after we eat a big meal, we feel sleepy, right? Because all of the blood and the energy is going towards the digestive system. So, maybe eating lighter during the day and between your training sessions and saving the bigger meal for the evening. This is more of a personal perspective. I've not worked on it with any kind of any customers or clients, but I have heard other people having similar results. Just play with what you think works for you, and kind of really monitor your body and monitor what's going on. And at the end of the day, I think you're can be the best judge of what feels good for you, and go, okay, 1 week I'm going to cut this thing out and see how I feel, and then maybe next week add something back in, like fruit, for example. Okay, fruit is great, but there's a lot of sugar in many fruits. So how do I feel in terms of my performance if I cut the fruit out? How does my weight look? Am I, because Jujitsu, I'm talking about weight a bit more than maybe, I would generally, because Jiu-Jitsu is a weight class sport, and it's a concern for a lot of people of being in the right weight class. That was a bit rambling, I think.
No,
but hopefully there's some good stuff there.
Absolutely. I've got a question here from one of my Patreon supporters, Michael. He wants to know about developing that grip strength for like gripping the gi and not damaging your fingers. So I think this is a little bit different as far as you talked about your first tournament and your forearms are all exhausted. This is more or less the healthy way to develop that grip strength and be able to use it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, does he specify with not damaging the fingers in terms of finger injuries, or just the wear and tear of the kind of grips that you use? Let's say if you're playing in Spider Guard.
I'll read his question. Is there a healthy way to develop grip strength and good grips for Spider Guard, but keep your fingers healthy?
I think probably I'm going to make an assumption here. When he refers to the finger health, I think some people complain about it. Almost feels like I've got arthritis in my fingers from playing a lot of Spider Guard, right? And then people will say, so if you then start doing maybe a lot of holding on to the sleeves of a gi and doing pull-ups on them, then you're going to kind of get that same wear and tear. I would say probably my favorite exercise for grip strength is hanging from a bar. Just hanging for time from a bar, whether it's one hand or two hands, and doing that for time. And I think if you can build up to doing 2 sets of 1 minute, you've got a pretty solid grip strength level there, and you can progress further than that. You can put a weight between your legs, you can maybe hang with one hand, you can put a thick bar, and you can continue to progress if you want to get really deep into it. But the reason I like it so much is it's fantastic for grip strength, but it's also going to help stretch out and strengthen those stiff elbows and help you kind of help with the elbow health, but really good for shoulder health. Apparently, when you look at some of the research, just hanging from a pull-up bar, and helps relieve a lot of the pressure that we have in the shoulder. And if you do it properly, where you're engaging the shoulder blade muscles and not just completely loose hanging, very good for the postural muscles in the back as well. So it's a great grip strength exercise, but also gives you something that's has much more health benefits than just the grip strength. And I think if your time is limited, you're always looking for exercises that give you the most impact. The other thing that I recommend a lot for the fingers is fingertip push-ups. So imagine you're in a push-up position, but only your fingertips and the tips of your thumbs are actually on the floor. Your palm is completely off the floor, almost like you're palming a basketball, but the basketball is not there. You're just kind of hitting the floor, and you can start off doing this on your knees, and then gradually build up to being able to do it with a full press up. For this that kind of exercise is maybe more into the 10 rep range rather than just the 5 reps, because the same kind of principles don't always apply for those smaller parts of your body in terms of the 5 or 6 rep range. That's a fantastic way to develop really good finger strength. And what you're also doing at the same time there, because the force is going against your fingers, it helps balance out a bit more the closing motion that we're doing when we're doing jiu-jitsu or doing the grip hangs. And then the other thing that I think is really, really good is if you can get some kind of grips that you would see in a rock climbing gym, or a grip, I forget the name of it. I think it's like a grip board where you're just kind of pinching the grips. I put a post on Instagram recently where I just put a bit of a wooden strip above the door frame in my garage, and I think it's the technical term is a crimp grip, where you're not grabbing with your full hand. And again, this is something you need to build up with. Maybe you start off with something a little bit thicker, and for that you probably only want to be doing hangs of like 10 to 15 seconds, very very short. And I think those three exercises combined, hanging from a pull-up bar, fingertip press-ups, and rock climbing grips where you haven't got a full grip, you're kind of more pinching or crimping onto the grip, are really great ways to develop the grip strength. And you haven't got as much. You can't see what I'm doing right now, but with the spider guard, you're really kind of, all your fingers are pinched in really, really close. It's a very tight motion, and it can be a lot of wear and tear. So these motions are a little bit different, but fantastic for developing that strength, and hopefully it doesn't give you that same kind of wear and tear on the hands and the fingers the spider guard does. And then the one other thing I would throw in there that can be helpful for a lot of people is to get rubber bands, thick rubber bands. You can get them from a company called Iron Mind, and I have no association with those guys, but I like their products. And you wrap it around your fingers and you open against the rubber bands, and again it's just going to balance out the muscles, so you're not just always performing the closing motion, you're strengthening the opening motion, and should for a lot of people help alleviate any kind of tendonitis they have in their elbows and those kind of areas.
Yeah, those the fingertip push-ups, maybe you mentioned that, and I'm like, man, and they start in your knees. Okay, anybody could probably do that, but then you mentioned that it helps with closing your grip, like closing your. I didn't really think about it, but we don't really care about how strong your fingers are to open. We want to lock on and grab something, and that is helping that. I never thought about that.
It balances.
Yeah.
It balances stuff out. And, with, let's say you twist your knee and, it's you plant your foot in a funny angle and you get an injury of that sort. That's the correct term for that would be a trauma injury. But let's say you just start to feel niggly in your hamstring, or you get niggles in your lower back or niggles in your hips. Most of those injuries come from imbalances, where one area is much stronger and tighter than the other area. So a lot of elbow pain, and it's specific depending on the person and where your elbow pain is, but a lot of elbow pain, particularly kind of on the outside of the elbow, can be because you're overstrong. Well, not overstrong, but you're far stronger and tighter on the inside of your forearm compared to the outside of the forearm. So, the strength of opening your hand will just help balance those things out.
So what are some of the more common mistakes people do when they start doing a strength and conditioning program for jiu-jitsu?
They do too much.
Too much?
Too much, and I'll specify, right? But they do too many reps.
Okay.
The most common thing is, if you read a fitness magazine, everything is kind of 8 to 10 reps or 10 to 12 reps and really pushing yourself to failure. That's great if you're trying to build muscle, but just know that building muscle is a really energy resource intensive task for the body, and the more that you do those kind of rep ranges, the more energy you need to put into recovering, the more sore you're going to feel the next day, the more it's going to impact your jiu-jitsu. I think people do too much. They do too many reps, and they'll do too many exercises as well, so too much volume, not just in terms of the reps, but the overall time they're spending in the gym. There's always cases for doing, let's say I do a barbell squat and I do split lunges. Okay, there's a case for maybe doing more than one exercise to develop the leg drive. But for most people, one good exercise for each of the key movements that we talked about, so the leg drive, the hip drive, core stability, core rotation, upper body push and upper body pull, one good exercise, 3 to 5 sets is going to be enough for most people. So you've got too many reps, too much volume, and the other mistake that I think people make the most of is too much high intensity training. So when I talk about high intensity training, technically that's interval training where you work flat out for 20 seconds, rest for 10 seconds, flat out for 20 seconds, rest for 10 seconds. So that's the hard and fast, or what most people think about in terms of high intensity training. But it could just be doing pull-ups to failure, as many kettlebell swings as you can, doing a lot of kind of circuit training, hill sprints followed by tire flips, followed by hitting a tire with a sledgehammer. And all of that training is good training, and it has its place. But when you're taxing your body and taxing your nervous system to its peak all of the time, you're far more likely to burn out, far more likely to run into overtraining and to get injured. And at least in most of the jiu-jitsu schools I've trained at, with the training can get pretty hard, and that's pretty high intensity as well. So if you're doing high intensity jiu-jitsu training, then high intensity conditioning, you're just pushing your body and pushing the same energy systems over and over. So try and think about what kind of balances out with your jiu-jitsu. So I think the three most common mistakes would be the rep range is too high. They're doing the too much volume and too many in terms of too many exercises, and they're doing too much high intensity training.
If they're not productive, you're working harder than you need to work, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not that those things don't have their place. Maybe you want to get in peak condition before a competition, so you reduce the volume of your training, but you do shorter sessions that are higher intensity. Then if you're really thinking about this, really scientifically leading up to a competition, then yeah, absolutely, those have their place. So if you're listening and saying, but I do high intensity training and it works for me, well, great if it works for you, but I'm not knocking that as a training methodology. I think you just got to know how it fits into your overall training or your overall training routine. And I don't think it's something that most people should be doing all of the time. I think you just end up burning out. Okay,
good to know. So you've got the website is bjjstrength.com. What do we find when we go there?
You've got some lovely pictures of me but with my beard, maybe some without my beard now. I feel a bit like Samson with my beard gone. But yeah, there's a free course up there I call Breathing for BJJ that I put together because I was speaking to a lot of people on the website, and one of the biggest things that people have a problem with is just breathing on the mat or getting out of breath on the mat. And I think first and foremost, let's look at what breathing patterns you're using, rather than just blaming your fitness, because quite often people are fit but they hold their breath too much or they don't breathe effectively. And I think breathing patterns are really important, and people talk about it, but I wanted to put together this free course that people could use to give them actual examples and exercises of how they can train it. There's a ton of stuff for a ton of blog content in terms of a lot of the stuff that I've touched on today in terms of the concepts and the principles behind strength and conditioning. Most of it is all written out there on the blog that people can kind of work through and help to plan their own training routine. There's video content in terms of how to do certain exercises, mobility, strength and conditioning, a couple of one or two circuits in there. There's two programs that people can buy, so ready-made strength and conditioning programs that people can purchase and just run away with and do their own training. One of them is something that's built up. It's called 15-Minute Strength, and it's real bare bone strength and conditioning, focusing on some key areas that you need to develop to be strong for jiu-jitsu, and that's something that's fairly recent. I think a lot of people will mistake the fact that they haven't, or think they haven't got enough time to train, to do strength training, which is one of the biggest reasons I think people don't add it on top of their jiu-jitsu. But if you do it smart and you do it with the right exercises, I believe just 15 minutes twice a week, you can get something that's really effective. So that's on there, and a couple of other things. So, my contact details are on there. If people just want to send me an email, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, just fire me questions. Then I'm always open to chatting and discussing stuff and any ideas. So yeah, it's all up there.
That's awesome. And the 15-minute strength, all you need, a pull-up bar and a kettlebell. That's it. Like keeping it really simple as far as equipment goes. You have those two things and you're good to go, and you've got that on there. Where can we find you on social media?
So Instagram, it's at BJJ Strength, and Facebook is BJJ S and C. So it's BJJ Strength and Conditioning is what it means. I'm on Twitter as well. I think it's at BJJ_strength, but I rarely use Twitter. But if people want to go on there, great. Instagram and Facebook are going to be the main ones, and
cool.
It's all linked on bjjstrength.com.
Yep, I'll put links to the website, and I'll throw links to the social media as well. To be able to keep up with you. Laurence, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any final thoughts or words for the audience?
Just enjoy jiu-jitsu, guys. Make the most of it, I think, is what I would say. Hopefully people have enjoyed it and picked up some valuable stuff. Get in touch if you can. Thank you for having me on the show. I really like what you guys are doing, and it's been great speaking with you.
Well, thanks so much. And just a little endorsement for strength and conditioning training. Picture yourself whenever you're going to train next. The class is almost over. The class is over. You've rolled several times. You're standing there and you're really tired, and you're considering, do I want to roll again? Can I roll again? Imagine if you felt good instead of exhausted, and how your training from that point on would go. And that's really, for me, not a guy who's not wanting to compete or do anything special. I'm just out here having a good time training jiu-jitsu. That's what strength and conditioning can do for me, is at the end of rolling, I feel really good. And somebody wants to roll another time, let's go. I feel good. Let's do it again. And that's just one thing that adding a little strength and conditioning has done for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can complement your jiu-jitsu more than anything else. You may have a little bit of discomfort at the start because you're getting out of your comfort zone, you're doing something new, but over the long term, for most people, right, there's always exceptions, right? But you look at the statistics. Being strong and being fit and healthy is going to allow you to stay on the mat for longer, and that's ultimately what we all want.
All right, we got a good guy in Laurence to help us get there. Thank you for hopping on here with me.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate having me on. Really good speaking to you.
I want to thank Laurence for jumping on the show with me today and sharing some of his knowledge about training jiu-jitsu, getting stronger, staying on the mat longer, and having that great performance while you're there. Check him out on social media. Check out his website. We'll put links to all that in the show notes. And if you think you know a friend that would enjoy this particular interview, share the episode with that person. You could just send them a link to the website or tell them in class. Episode 242 with Laurence Griffiths was outstanding. And we appreciate that. Anytime you share the podcast with somebody, it's always an honor for us to hear that coming back from you guys.
Yeah, definitely check out his Facebook page, BJJ Strength. And I've went on there, and I can tell you here in just a short time, I have learned some stretches, some mobility stuff, and, this is going to help me a lot. Just, I haven't even went through everything, but the little bit I have, I've already learned stuff. And I know, especially like myself, older grappler who needs to, stay limber, flexible, strong, this person, his page is going to help me out a lot. And, so I'm going to definitely tap into his knowledge.
That is awesome. Let's tap into some knowledge from somebody who has traveled the world doing jiu-jitsu. This is an article from the website YOLO BJJ. So you only live once, BrazilianJujitsu-blog.com. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can find it easily. 5 tips to be welcomed in almost any gym on Earth. So just a heads up, this is going to work for outer space. We're staying in the home globe here, keeping things on Earth. But this is how you could travel and train and have a great time. And these are great tips from a very experienced person.
Yeah, I really like the article. I haven't done a ton of traveling, but I've done a little bit. Got to train a few different places. And some of these things I didn't even really think about, but I guess I've done them. And so it has worked out for me. His first point is, if at all possible, and he really stresses it, like, you should find a way possible. Contact the gym first. He says walking in unannounced is not only poor etiquette, but it can be aggravating to both you and the other students or the coach. I'm not sure if it's really poor etiquette in most places in the States, or if maybe part of that's international travel that the author's done. But certainly it's easier if you've talked to the school beforehand. You make sure that the class you're dropping in on is appropriate for your skill level. And so, yeah, I would agree with that it's best if you can to call first.
Yeah, that one's the point where if I'm traveling and I want to train, if I can't get a hold of a gym, I try another gym. And I won't go to that gym. I can't contact somebody. And most websites will have an email address or a phone number. Try them both. They're not responsive. I'm probably not going to go. I guess I can say I have not traveled and trained anywhere that I wasn't able to contact first. That's a pretty big one. I don't know if the gym's even open. I don't have a clue what's going on over there. If you can't respond to an email or a phone call, sorry. I don't want to all the trouble of getting out, in a town I don't know or a city I don't know, and driving halfway across the city, and they don't train that day, or it's a secret competition class and I'm not welcomed or whatever. I've never had that situation because I call first, and like a business, because these jiu-jitsu gyms are a business, they answer their phone. They respond to potential customers or people that are asking questions about them. Yeah, I think that's a really important one.
Definitely an important one. And number two is one I never really thought of. What he talks about doing is, if you haven't made arrangements for where and when to show up, then be ready to be turned away. Like what he's talking about is, he kind of treats going to the gym, like a trial run. He'll bring his gear, but he leaves it in the car. He shows up into the gym and, just stands there waiting for somebody to approach him. He basically, he may have already looked online, knows when the class schedule is, but he's going to pretend like he knows nothing about jiu-jitsu, nothing about this school. He's waiting for them to invite him in, and they're going to come over to him. They're going to be friendly to him. They're going to invite him in. And like you said, this way you didn't ask if you could train. They invited you to train. That's one I never really thought of, but it just shows that you really want to train. You're just a polite person. You're waiting for somebody else to take the opportunity to invite you and say, "Hey, come on, let's train. Let me teach you something."
Yeah, he talks about pretending like he knows nothing about jiu-jitsu, and I'm sure he's only talking about the first few minutes he's in waiting for them. It's almost worst etiquette to pretend like you don't know much and then go out there and start running circles around guys. And that's kind of, I'm skipping ahead here, but that is his fourth point, is don't go too hard. When you're a guest in a gym, nobody wants to feel like some purple or brown belt showed up and they're going to try and take everybody to school. So just roll friendly and give and take. And if your training partner catches you with something, just go ahead and tap. And every time you see a submission, you don't have to snatch it for the first roll or two. And once you get to know the guys, you can turn things up a little bit.
The best was on point number 4 right there. He was talking about when he rolled with Professor Jeremy Harris, who's a solo black belt. And, when he came to his academy, the professor had no idea who he was. He just knew he had a company called YOLO BJJ. So the professor paired him with a 2-stripe white belt, just to see how he treated the guy. When he was done, he asked, the professor, "Hey, did I, do okay with your guy?" And the professor smiled and said, "If you hadn't, you would have been rolling with me next." I just think that's a cool story. It's don't roll too hard. Treat people with respect and courtesy. If you're better than somebody, let's just have fun. Let's just roll. Let's learn. You're not there as a death match, as Byron likes to say, or to prove a point. You're there to make friends, to learn some more jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And if you think you're rolling with somebody and nobody's watching you, especially if you're a guest at the gym, you're most likely wrong by about almost everybody in the gym.
49%. Yeah.
The coach will be watching you if he's not the one rolling with you. A lot of the students will be watching you to just kind of see what kind of a person you are and what's happening, because it's easy. If you're rolling with Gary, and I know what type of person Gary is, and he's like upset with you. Okay, I missed something, but he's already made Gary mad. Or if Gary's talking to you and seems to be having a good time, I know what to expect. If you're doing something that's rude to Gary, people will glance over. They're not likely studying your game, but it helps them get an idea of what's happening with this guest at their gym, at their home. And people are watching, definitely instructors watching. And if you're going to come in there and cause trouble, you can expect trouble coming right back at you, except for you're vastly outnumbered and you're in foreign territory. They've been nice enough to welcome you in as a guest. Be like a guest in somebody's house. Be polite. And they'll be happy to have you. I mean, you should leave a smile on your face, and they should be happy that you came by and got some mat time. I know Jake Fox is thrilled every time we have a listener come through Wichita and they come into the gym. He's like, I like this to be a place where when somebody comes to Wichita, they come here and train. That's great. It's like a thing that somebody wants to do. If they train jiu-jitsu and they come to Wichita, he really just likes that feeling. It's because the people that are coming in are having fun. The other people that are here training with them are enjoying that process. I mean, it's a big deal, and it kind of it speaks loudly about you and where you come from. Less about how good you roll and more about the type of a person that you are when you're there. Another thing that speaks about that is the fifth point. Basically, be clean. Don't show up with a dirty gi or ringworm or smelling terrible. If something happens and your gi is getting funky while you travel, or you're having problems with cleanliness, you may look at not going or calling, because you're going to call them, or hey, I'm in town, I would like to train. I don't have a gi that I can wear. A lot of times they'll have a gi you could put on and train with. There's a lot of options there, but you don't want to come in and be the person that is offensive for odor reasons, or I guess hygiene reasons. It's not good at your hometown either. Also not good when you're traveling.
Trim your fingernails, brush your teeth, wear clean gi, all those things, right?
Yeah. I don't think these things need to be said, but occasionally they do. And hey, how about this? As a challenge, ask just when you're rolling next, when you're with somebody who's a friend, hey, does my gi smell kind of funky? And just to see, because it's hard to tell if you smell bad. And maybe they're just shy about telling you. No, they can't smell anything at all. Okay, I didn't know if it was me or what was going on. Or if they say, yeah, it is kind of funky this week. Well, it's probably funky every week, and they're just not wanting that conversation. But you open that door, let you know, hey, maybe I'm the sneaky person in the classroom. And all you need to do is take care of your gi a little differently. And your instructor should be able to help you with that and figure out ways where you're missing a step as far as the care of your gi and keeping it clean, or maybe the care of your own skin. I don't know.
One we skipped over that I like a lot, point number 3, when you get on the mat, smile and shake everybody's hand. Go around to everybody. And, I don't see this happen all the time, but the people I have seen do that, and, when I do see people do that, it just, I don't know, it gives me a warm fuzzy. I know you're probably going to mess with me because I said that word there, Byron, but I really do like it when I see somebody do that, and I don't do it all the time. And just reading this one, I think that's something I'm gonna do.
Yeah, that's an important one. I mean, going in there and being a friendly person, you're going to have a more enjoyable experience. You're not coming in to teach a seminar or show everybody how great you are at jiu-jitsu. You're going in there to experience jiu-jitsu locally at this place you're traveling to, and it'll be a lot more enjoyable if you have that fun attitude. And then Gary gets a warm fuzzy out of it. That's great, my man.
Definitely, that's great.
Byron, it's nice to ask for feedback if you're the one with the smelly gi, but I find just to get the right culture in your gym, it's nice to let other people know how they're doing to it. And I try not to be I'm never mean, so I take the other approach, and if they're doing good, I want to tell them. And so if I have their back or something, I might just whisper in their ear, "You smell nice."
That's the last thing they'll remember
as they're going to sleep.
No, but it's awkward to tell somebody, gi's a little funky this week. That's not so bad versus you're always the worst smelling person in here. Nobody wants to train with you. Like, there's different ways you can do it. You definitely don't want to embarrass somebody and do it in front of everybody. When you get a moment with them, one-on-one, say, hey, man, your gi's kind of funky. And I would say this week or lately, and just let them know that they're having a problem. They probably don't even realize it. And, you don't want people to be avoiding somebody because they smell bad. It happens.
Yep. Another thing that works good is buy some Tide Pods and put them in his gym bag. Maybe that'll give you the hint. And if not, it's going to give you a little bit of food for after rolling.
Is that what you do with Tide Pods?
Well, that's what I hear.
Well, it helps. It's good to have your laundry coming out of the dryer warm and fuzzy. And that brings us to our audiobook that Joe and Gary are working on this week.
Hold on, though. I thought you wanted to do your audiobook, Byron.
Okay, sure, that's fine. What do we have, Gary?
Yeah, because I know we talked about that beforehand. And, the great thing is Byron really helps out a lot of these, people just starting jiu-jitsu and trying to make people better at jiu-jitsu. And, the cool thing is I know a lot of you guys enjoy 6 games for BJJ. A lot of people have checked it out. It's really great. We talked about Ragdoll earlier. It's really helped people's games. But Byron spent weeks, months, coming up with these games, years. And there was a lot of trial and error. And the cool part about this is he's coming up with his new audiobook. And, me and Joe, we're waiting to, check it out. But it's games that did not make 6 games for BJJ. Some of them, were illegal. Some of them, got shut down by the fire department. There was a lot of stuff going on. And what Byron's going to talk about is some of these games that, he tested out and they failed, for one reason or another. And it's not going to help your jiu-jitsu game, but it's very entertaining. And I personally think this could be, one of his best-selling books of all time. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
Yeah. How about the chapter Jiu-Jitsu on Ice? Tell us a little bit about that one to start off with, Byron.
That one, it was funny on that one because it was a cold January day, and Gary was being, he was telling me my gi smelled bad in the parking lot, and I just wasn't in the mood for it. And so we threw down right there in the icy parking lot. And
it was the same parking lot where Byron got the idea, because we'd talk after class to start a podcast.
we did conceive the idea of a podcast in a parking lot with some romantic music. But yeah, the whole ice thing, it was different. I do most of my guard passes standing up. I couldn't stand up without falling down. I didn't have skates on. Gary had skates. He tried to stab me with a skate. It just went poorly. And so I took that game, I threw it out, and it's landed in this book. Also, so we have jiu-jitsu on ice.
Well, let's go with chapter 3.
Yeah.
Kickballs. Tell us about that one.
It's just a different way to pass a guard, and it helps distract the person. So, we talk about angle, leverage, and distraction. It's definitely more on the distraction side of, getting your technique to work. But yeah, playing a little kickball, helping you pass the guard has been, it's a good game to play, but long term, it's not really a healthy thing to do for your training partners, and they're going to have problems down the road, conceiving of their own podcasts and that sort of thing. So we took that game out and we put that one on ice. Came up with the ice idea.
Good one.
Go ahead,
users out there, if you're considering trying to play that game, it's definitely one you don't want to tell your training partners beforehand that you'll be playing.
Yeah, because they will not be playing guard at all. And or they try to hit a home run, and that's not what you want to have happening. Of course, if we have the ice game, we have the fire game. That also failed miserably. I really thought Gary would not scream and run when I lit him on fire. The standard is stop, drop, and roll, and he took off, and he got some mild full thickness burns or third-degree burns just on part of his body. Just, it's really hard to see, but it's just on his face, neck, arms, legs, back, chest, and crotch there.
Bottom of my feet and bottom of
his feet. So just a little bit. And so really we had to look at that one, and there was no way to put that one successfully in the audiobook. So the first audiobook is coming out in this next one. It's just hard to get these games to blend together well to actually be effective for actual training. But if somebody's grappling and they have a lighter in their pocket, or you attack somebody and they have a lighter pocket, you might just light Gary on fire next time.
It's happened before, so I think I would be used to it. And I know the reason you made that one stop, drop, and roll. It was you thought more people would roll. It's kind of like doing an Inamari roll. You stop, drop, and roll. But when you told me that's what I thought we were going to do. I had no clue you were going to douse my gi with lighter fluid and then set me on fire.
Yeah. Surprise is a big thing in my my techniques, Gary. Yeah. Apologize.
But I do appreciate you, giving me a gallon of cocoa butter to take care of the pain.
It was awkward applying that to your skin every evening, but I felt like I owed it to you.
Yeah. But yeah, so definitely check out that book. It's coming out just in time for Christmas. It's definitely going to be a Wichita Eagle bestseller. Not a New York Times, a Wichita Eagle, I would assume.
Which is the name of a local newspaper here that is almost closed. Like most newspapers nationally.
But definitely, I think it's going to be a very good listen.
There we go. I that was a fun one. You guys turned it on me at the last minute there. Well played.
Well, the bad thing is I was going to try to beat you to that part, and you kind of jumped to it.
It's like when you see a gun, you got to jump the gun, Gary.
Yep, it just stop, drop, and roll.
With all that behind us, we definitely want to thank some of our Patreon supporters. We'll highlight a couple of them this week. Adam, Ryan, and Dennis. Thanks, guys, for being a supporter on Patreon, and just happy to give you guys another shout-out for the support. If you want to do like they did, if you want to contribute $1 per episode, we'd be honored to have it, and we're going to use that money to make the show, website, and everything we do better and more professional, and help bring this to the next level. We'll also send you a 5-inch BJJ Brick gi patch in the mail anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter where you're traveling to. Actually, you probably send it to your home address. But, we talked about being a traveler and traveling the world doing jiu-jitsu. Doesn't matter where you are. We'll send you a gi patch if you give us your address. And a sticker. And the sticker is BJJ Brick sticker. It's not just a random sticker of some dragon or bunny rabbit. It's a BJJ Brick sticker.
Could we get one of those?
I don't know. I'll put a stamp on the envelope. If that's also kind of a sticker. But also, when you join the Patreon group, you're invited to join our private Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, we'd be honored to have you in the group. Send me an email with your Facebook page on there, and I'll get you added to the group. That's always awesome. We're always talking about different things that are happening with the podcast on there, and if we need any advice or we need to survey a small group of people, we do that on the private Facebook group. If we need some questions for an upcoming guest, a lot of times we'll ask the Facebook group. So thank you guys for doing that.
And if you're a Patreon supporter, and well, even if you're not, we'd like to see you in June. We've got an event coming up. I believe we're dubbing this now the Omapalatapalooza.
That is good, Joe.
That'll be Be June 22, 23, and 24 in Wichita, Kansas. That's the vacation destination of America. And I think the end of June, it might be springtime up there. So come join us Friday night. The 22nd will be open mat. The 23rd, we have Rolly Delgado and Tim Sled. Two pretty brilliant guys in the jiu-jitsu community. There'll be a lot to learn. And then on the 24th, you'll have the BJJ Brick crew training with you. This will all be happening at Fox Fitness in Wichita, Kansas.
There we go. Happy to have all the people here locally, and anybody traveling in town, let us know, and we'll be happy to make sure you have a great time, great weekend here in Wichita. We'll be doing things off the mat. We're looking at different options, maybe going to a comedy club, going out for, out to eat when we're not actually on the mats. I don't know what we're going to be doing. We might even be recording a podcast with a little audience, and there's a lot of options. Let us know if you have any ideas. bjjbrick@gmail.com is a good way to get a hold of us. And yeah, Omoplata Palooza, that's a cool name. And I was thinking about showing some Omoplata details to a finish that a lot of people consider Omoplata a sweep. I do not. To me, it's a submission that is you could stop them from rolling out of most of the time. But yeah, if that's one of the things that interests you, it's definitely on the table. But hopefully we'll see lots of you guys that weekend. And it will likely sell out. So check out the link in the show notes as soon as you're looking like you'll be able to go to get your spot reserved.
So definitely do not miss the Go-Go Plata Palooza. Oh, wait. Plata Palooza. I'm sorry.
There's some kind of a palooza. Who knows? But really, it'll say BJJ Brick Camp on the little thing there. That's what we're talking about. Check us out on social media. Joe has really been doing great, providing most of the posts on Facebook. He's always throwing up cool ideas and videos, sometimes that are related to jiu-jitsu, sometimes that are jiu-jitsu, sometimes that are totally different, and he'll kind of bring you an off-the-mat lesson onto the Facebook page. YouTube is full of videos. That's what they like you to put on YouTube. I've done several Q&As and reviews of products, and all the episodes are up on YouTube as well, if that's easier for you to listen to it there.
Joe, the one I really liked you posted the other day was that thing where you tie the 3 tennis balls together and you throw it. I really am planning on trying that one. That looks fun. I would like to try it.
Perfect. Try it on your neighbors.
Yeah, definitely. I was planning on trying it on Byron. But,
The first thing you do is you throw a rubber snake on the ground next to them, and then when they take off running, you hit them with the 3 tennis balls.
That thing was awesome. And, I watched the whole video. It's easy to make. And I think I'm going to do it.
Awesome.
I'll have to avoid Gary for that day.
Well, I did get you today, Byron, but your wife did not take advantage of it.
Yeah. You showed her a bit of kryptonite to my game.
Yeah. We were rolling today, and I look over, and Byron, what did you do to her? You had her look the other way or something, and then
I said, hey, look at Gary's hair; it's all messed up. She looked up at your hair, which I don't know, your hair doesn't really get messed up.
Messed up. Yeah.
But I hopped on her back.
He attacked. So, I waited a couple minutes, and then I pretended somebody walked in and got Byron to look totally around while he was in butterfly guard.
Yeah, he called it somebody's name, and it was literally 2 minutes later, you do the same thing to me. You're like, hey, what's happening, Bill? And I'm like, looking, where's Bill? And I can't find him, and I'm looking, and my wife is also looking for this guy, and Gary's like, you blew it. That was your chance.
Yeah, but I still owe you, so I'm going to get you with whatever those tennis balls are called. You're gonna get hit with that.
The 3 balls.
Yeah.
Had a great week, guys. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. Stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, get better. We'll see you on the mats, guys.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
We did conceive the idea of a podcast in a parking lot with some romantic music. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Check us out next week. And don't forget to check out the archives at bjjbrick.com or on this YouTube channel.